Good afternoon, learners and educators. Welcome to this afternoon's Geography Telematic Teaching Project presentation. Today we will be looking at the economic geography of South Africa. I trust that you are all well, that you are all keeping safe and taking care of yourselves in the midst of this terrible pandemic that we are facing. And today's presentation is going to be slightly different in that we are going to complete an entire section in the 55 minutes allocated to us. This means that I will not be able to go into much detail with every particular section, but I will cover everything and ensure that you know what you need to do to prepare for the exam. So without any further ado, let's get started. When we look at the economy of South Africa, the first thing that we need to do is to look at the structure of the economy. What makes up the economy of a country? And as you can see in the slide, that South Africa's economy is made up primarily of 4 sectors. We know that there are 5, but the 4 main sectors are the primary sector, first of all, and you've been learning since grade 8 already that this involves the extraction of raw materials, right? And examples of primary activities would be agriculture, mining, forestry, and fishing. Then the secondary economic sector involves the processing and manufacturing of products. This takes place in industries, and it also concerns construction. Tertiary economic activities are those where services are rendered to us, and these various services are services like trade, transport services, medical services, legal, financial services, etc. And then lastly, the quaternary sector. Here we are looking at a high level of expertise and technology, and we're looking at scientists, research. This is very important in the quaternary sector, discovery of new information, and it goes hand in hand with the use of technology. So that is, in a nutshell, the economic sectors that makes up South Africa's economy. And every person in South Africa that has a job, that is working, would be involved in one of those 4 sectors. Just as a matter of interest, the quinary sector, the last one that's not on the slide, would be your government. That's the highest level of government and people leading in industries, etc. Right. Let's go on to the contribution to the GDP of South Africa. Now, in the bottom right of the slide, you can see the definition of GDP. You should know this. GDP is your gross domestic product, and it is the total value of goods and services produced in a country in a year. And we can see how various activities, how various economic activities contribute to the GDP exponentially. Agriculture, for example, right at the top, contributes 3% of all the goods and services produced in the country. The value of that, the money that the country makes, agriculture contributes 3%, electricity 4%, etc. What is important to note here is that in the exam, if you get a graph of this nature, you can often be asked a question like, what percentage do primary activities contribute? You then need to know that agriculture and mining are the 2 primary activities that are indicated. So agriculture would be 3%, mining would be 8%, so primary activities would contribute 11%. You could be asked, what percentage does secondary activities contribute to the economy of South Africa? So when you go through that list, construction, building buildings, that would be a secondary activity. Manufacturing, those would be your 2 secondary activities. So 4% for construction, 13% for manufacturing. So secondary would make up 17%. Then tertiary would be provision of electricity, transport and communication, trade, finance, and then government would obviously be your quinary. Right, let's move on. Graphs and statistics. Now, very important. In your geography exam, you will get a variety of different graphs, statistics that are portrayed in a different way. So let's have a look at what we have here. We have a simple bar graph showing 3 different colors. And we can see that the red color makes up 72.01%, and at the bottom, at the key, I can see that these are tertiary activities. So tertiary activities makes up 72.01% of South Africa's employment structure. In other words, of all the people working in South Africa, all the people who have jobs, 72.01% are involved in the tertiary sector. 22.91% in the secondary sector and 5.09% in the primary sector. So, here we have a table. Look at the top row of the table, South Africa. The same statistics are now portrayed in tabular form, in the form of a table. The only difference here is we can now compare South Africa to 4 other countries, namely Brazil, Cameroon, Japan, and the USA. And we can see the employment structure of these 5 countries. What percentage of the total workforce is employed in the primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors, respectively. Let's have a look at South Africa. 5.09% in the primary sector. Look at Cameroon, 79% in the primary sector and only 7% in the tertiary sector. What does that tell me? That tells me that Cameroon is a less economically developed country. A less economically developed country. How do I know that? Because a lot of people in that country are involved in fishing, farming, forestry to make a living. And at grade 12 level, we know that when you have most of your people involved in primary activities, your country is not as developed. It is less developed than the others in that list. Look at the USA. Let's go back to our table and look at the USA. The USA has only 1% of its workforce involved in primary activities. Does this mean that the USA is producing less food, fewer mineral products, fewer forestry products than Cameroon? Not at all. That 1% in the USA is producing far more than the 79% of the workforce in Cameroon. Why? Because in the USA, everything would be mechanized. Farming would be mechanized, mining would be mechanized, and so much more work is being done so much more efficiently by fewer people. And if one looks at tertiary activities in the USA, you can see that 74% of your workforce is involved in the tertiary sector, whereas in Cameroon, only 7% of your workforce is involved in the tertiary sector. Now, if we, oops, sorry about that, let me just go back. I'm so sorry about this. Now, if we look at the next set of graphs, there are 2 pie charts. And we can see the pie chart to the left is characteristic of a developing country. Look at the graph. Notice the biggest portion of your workforce is involved in the primary sector, the smallest in the tertiary sector. Whereas the pie chart to the right showing the developed country shows that most of your people are involved in in tertiary and the fewest amount in primary. Now we can see that South Africa is tending towards being a developed country. It is not a developed country yet, but it is tending towards becoming a developed country. It is more developed than what it is developing. And the reason for that is our dual economy in South Africa. We know that in South Africa, when we go into the larger metropolitan areas, into the cities, we find that these areas are far more developed. Remember in grade 11, when you looked at the core periphery model, you saw that as one moves to the core areas, your large cities, your large metropolitan areas, there you find high levels of development. But as one moves away from these core areas to the periphery, to your rural areas and beyond, we find very, very low levels of development. So even though South Africa as a country is tending towards being a developed or a more economically developed country, there are still parts of our country that are far less developed than other parts. Now we're going to start looking specifically at primary activities. What do you as a grade 12 geography learner need to know about primary activities? First of all, the first primary activity we are going to look at is agriculture. Now, grade 12s, we only look at agriculture and mining, okay? So, what do you have to know about agriculture and about mining. In both these sectors, you have to know what is the sector about. What is agriculture about? What is mining about? Why is it important to South Africa? Both agriculture and mining. Why is agriculture important? What role does it play in South Africa? Why is mining important? What role does it play in South Africa? Then you need to know what are the factors that favor both agriculture and mining, and then what are the factors that hinder, the problematic factors that slow down agriculture and mining. When you are studying these factors, try to remember those that are common to both. For example, you will notice as we go along that one of the hindering factors is the fact that we have a high rate of HIV. So in the exam, if you are asked, discuss 3 factors that hinder agriculture in South Africa, or discuss 2 factors that hinder mining in South Africa, you could use the fact that we have high levels of HIV that is depleting the workforce, which means that more people have to be trained, and this is a costly affair. So when you are studying, try to find factors that are common to both, and then that will be so much easier to understand and to remember. But let's get back to our presentation. So, agriculture. What are the favoring and hindering factors? Before we can look at that, we have to look at the term small-scale farmers and large-scale farmers. Now, often in the exam, learners get confused when they see these terms because you've learned about subsistence farming and commercial farming. Am I right? Now, a small-scale farmer can be both subsistence or commercial. Generally speaking, your smaller scale farmers are subsistence farmers. Now, you know what subsistence farmers are. You've been looking at the concept literally since grade 9 already. So you know what a subsistence farmer is, the farmer who's farming to feed his family, to keep his family alive, and we know the characteristics of subsistence farming. Those are the farmers that produce a wide variety of crops. They don't necessarily use machinery. Very often they don't own the land on which they farm in, etc., etc. You know the characteristics of subsistence and commercial farming. So small-scale farmers can be both subsistence and commercial. Small-scale farmers tend to have a low production, and the contribution of small-scale farmers towards the GDP of South Africa is very, very small. Your large-scale farmers are predominantly, I would go as far as saying almost exclusively, commercial farmers. They produce huge volumes, and they contribute the most to the GDP. In South Africa, the factors that favor agriculture, there's a high demand because of our large population size. There's a high demand for agricultural products. Each one of us, on a regular basis, whether it's daily or weekly, needs to go to the shops to go and purchase food, right? These are your the products of farming. So the demand for agricultural products favors agriculture. The fact that we have many fertile floodplains in the country, our high summer temperatures, which helps crop to grow, the availability of labor in South Africa, the fact that lots of research is being done into agriculture, various irrigation schemes that we have that you looked at in grade 11 also, where water is being taken from one part of the country where there's enough water to other sections of the country where there's less water. The Tugela Vaal, for example, comes into mind here. And we have lots of ports and airports to trade. Learners, please check your notes that your teachers have given you. Check your textbooks. There are factors that I have on my list that might not be in your book. And then also you might have factors that are not here. But make sure that you know as many of these factors as you can. When we look at the negative factors, the factors that hinder agriculture, and amongst them are the fact that South Africa is a low rainfall country. Most of South Africa receives very low rainfall. We have high rates of soil erosion. There are many natural disasters. We can think back to the drought that we experienced just over a year, 2 years ago. The fact that most of our farmers are still subsistence farmers. We have lots of pests that decrease production. The high crime rate in South Africa. HIV/AIDS I spoke about earlier. And especially coupled with berg winds, which we did earlier this year in our climatology section, the occurrence of veld fires. So those are the factors that hinder agriculture, which slow it down. We move on. What is the contribution of agriculture to our economy, and which agricultural products do we produce in South Africa? Now, we can see here that agriculture contributes 3.1% of our GDP. That's the first contribution of agriculture to the economy. Of all the money made in South Africa, 3.1% comes from agriculture. Agriculture also produces food. That's important. Everybody needs to eat. So we get our food from the agricultural sector. Agriculture develops infrastructure. Without spending too much time here, you can think roads were built connecting the rural areas to the city, power lines were set up, dams, irrigation systems, etc. So lots of the infrastructure that we have in our cities, in our country, comes from the fact that agriculture needed that infrastructure in order to be successful. Agriculture also is a large employer of labor, so in other words, it provides work. Your textbook might state it slightly differently. It provides employment, it provides work to people. Then if we look at the other side of the equation, industry supplies raw materials to industries. Sorry, agriculture supplies raw materials to industries. Just think about it. That can of jam that you opened, the fruit that was in that jam was grown on a farm. That fruit, the peaches or whatever, was the raw material that was used to produce the jam. We buy jars of coffee, we buy tea, we buy yogurt and various cheeses and milk products, etc. All those products were produced in industries that used agricultural raw materials as the basis of their products. And then the last item, the last bullet on our table, is that exports earn valuable foreign exchange. In South Africa, we are lucky in that we have a large variety of climatic conditions. So we can produce a very, very wide variety of crops. That would be one of the favorable factors that you could add to that list as well. We produce a wide variety of crops and products because of the various climatic conditions that we have in different parts of the country. The Southwestern Cape, for example, where we grow deciduous fruit, KwaZulu-Natal, where we have a subtropical fruit, etc. I'm not going to go through the entire country, but you know what I mean. So these products we export, and we know that in the export market, products are sold in dollars and pounds, so we make valuable foreign exchange from exporting our agricultural products. Some of the main products that we produce in South Africa: fruit. I've already spoken to you about deciduous fruit, subtropical fruit, citrus fruit. We produce various grains and seed, such as maize, wheat, oats, sunflowers, canola. We have various forms of livestock, such as beef, mutton, and pork. And ostrich meat is also very popular. And we produce lots of sugar and then also dairy products. These are not our only agricultural products, but these are the main agricultural products that are produced in our country. Let's move on to the concept of food security. Now, learners, every year when we're marking the final paper, this question, the definition of food security. Now, let me make it clear from the start. Food security is not a person. It is not the gentleman in the uniform at the shop standing there making sure that people do not steal the food. Please do not write that in your script at the end of the year. Food security refers to access that people have to food. When all people in a country have enough food to sustain a healthy lifestyle, that is what food security is. As a citizen of South Africa, do I have access to enough food to keep me healthy? That is what food security means. So if a country has food security or is in a state of food security, all the people have access to food. If a country is in a state of food insecurity, then not all the people have enough food to sustain a healthy lifestyle. Once again, in the exam, be very careful. Sometimes they question you on food security, and sometimes they question you on food insecurity. Please take your time. Remember, in your final paper, you have 3 hours to complete 3 questions. You have more than enough time to finish your paper. Take care. Very, very often, marks are lost not because learners do not know the work, but because learners are in a hurry and they are rushing. And they don't take time to read the question properly. So often a question, for example, will be based on food insecurity. And I can see that all the factors the learner is giving me in his answer or her answer has to do with food security and not food insecurity. So just take your time and be careful when answering your questions. So, when it comes to food security, the factors that hinder food security will obviously overlap with the factors that hinder agriculture. Because if agriculture cannot take place properly, then there is not going to be a sense of food security. So let's just run through this list very quickly. The lack of fertile land in any country, and we can apply these factors to any country in the world. If your country, like South Africa, has a lack of fertile land, then food security will be hampered. If there are many, many natural disasters such as droughts, if there is poverty, because often food is available. I could often walk into a Pick n Pay or Fruit and Veg City or Woolworths or any supermarket, and food is available, the shelves are full. But if people are poor and they don't have money, they cannot access this food. So poverty is one of the factors that hinders food security. The increase in price of food products. Everybody has, over the last month where I work, one of the major topics of discussion is how the price of food has escalated, especially now during this pandemic, and how much more money we have to spend on food. So think about it. If people who are employed are struggling and are complaining about the price of food, imagine those people who are unemployed, who have no source of income. Just think about it, okay? So the increase in the food price. Climate change. Climate change plays a big role because climate change will tie in with droughts. Waste of food. We often read of how much food is actually available in various countries in the world, but food is being wasted by those who have. And those who don't have access to that food. Land reform or lack of land reform, where people don't have access to land on which they can produce their own food. Uncontrolled population growth. Obviously, the larger the size of our population, the more people there are to feed, the faster the population grows, the more people there are to feed, and the more difficult it will be to maintain a state of food security in the country. And then the last of our hindering factors is once again that the majority of our farmers are subsistence farmers, which means that they are producing food to feed their families, but not enough for the markets. Let's move on to the to the measures. How can we enhance our sense of food security? By promoting sustainable agriculture, right? Your educators will elaborate on that. Farming methods that enable farmers to farm in a sustainable manner, by preventing soil erosion, by finding more efficient ways of storing food so that food doesn't go off, so that rats and various other rodents don't get to the food and destroy them, by reducing the wastage of water so that we have more water available for farming, by regulating the food prices. Certain basic food prices already regulated, like bread and milk. Shops cannot charge beyond a certain amount. Those prices are regulated so that the poorest of the poor have access to basic foodstuffs. By supporting small-scale farmers, by using better farming techniques, drought management techniques, and then urban food gardens. This last point is something that is becoming very, very prevalent in cities throughout the world, where people are encouraged, where communities are planting food gardens. Instead of planting roses outside their house or in their gardens in front of the home, many, many people are encouraged to produce food which people within communities swap, which they make available to poorer people, etc. And these urban food gardens then help to enhance our state or our sense of food security. Right, that was agriculture in a nutshell. Once again, learners, I've just scratched on the surface. You need to go back, go through. I will make this PowerPoint available to your educators. I'll send it to people in a PDF format as well, so it's easier to access. So you will have access to this as well. Use this resource. Go back to your textbooks, go back to your notes, and ensure there are things that I skipped over, that I couldn't mention in this presentation, that you are going to have to go over with on your own. Now we move on to our second primary activity, which is mining. The contribution and significance of mining, same like with agriculture. Mining contributes more. It contributes 9.5, that's almost 10% of all the money made in the country comes from the mining sector. The same as with agriculture, it provides many, many jobs. Mining is a huge job provider in South Africa. Because of mining, harbors have expanded. Durban Harbour, for example, has grown, has expanded because of mining activities, because of minerals being imported and exported. Mining supplies raw materials to industries. We can think of coal, for example, which is the main fuel source in our heavy industries. Iron ore, which is our main industrial raw material, our main industrial metal. And then other, in the jewelry industry, for example, we have diamonds and gold, etc., that are being mined. So various industries use mining products as their raw materials. Of all the foreign exchange that we earn, in other words, from all our exports, everything that we sell, 50% of what we export comes from mining. Mining also stimulates other sectors of the economy. The jewelry industry, for example, grew because of mining. And then many towns and infrastructure developed. We can think immediately of a place like Kimberley, Johannesburg, which is today one of the largest cities in the world, a big, big city, the largest city in South Africa. Johannesburg started out, was established because of gold which was discovered there, and because of mining. Towns and infrastructure developed. An interesting thing to note is that the town of Kimberley had electric street lighting before New York. When Kimberley had electric street lights, New York was still using gas street lights. Someone had to go along every day and light up the street lights in New York because they were still using gas lights. Why? Because at the time in Kimberley there was so much money available because of the diamonds that were being mined there, and that is how the infrastructure then developed, right? Lots of roads connecting various parts of South Africa, railway lines, harbors, etc., power lines were laid, etc., and all of these due to the fact that mining activities were so prevalent or are so prevalent in South Africa. Right. What is the significance of mining? We've now looked at the contribution. How does it contribute to the economy? But why is mining so significant? As I've just mentioned, the discovery of diamonds and gold developed the infrastructure. Many of our major highways and harbors, etc., were developed because of mining. It's the driving force behind development of South Africa. Mining took the lead before South Africa started developing as an industrial country. It was first a mining country. And mining was the driving force that led to the development of industries in South Africa. Many universities and other educational institutions have their existence are in existence because of mining activities. We have a variety of minerals. There's a slide coming up. I'm not going to elaborate on that now because in one of the next slides we will see which minerals we mine. Because of mining, lots of countries invested in South Africa. Many countries invested money in South Africa because they knew they would get a large return on their money because of our large mineral reserves and because of the success of mining in South Africa. And then mining has also attracted immigrants. Now please notice that this is in the positive side. It has attracted immigrants. So lots of people living in South Africa, their families came here, their forefathers came to South Africa because of the gold and diamonds and eventually other minerals that were discovered in South Africa. And there are quite a number of you who are listening to me right now. If you go back through your family history, will learn that your great-grandparents or even further back came to South Africa because of the mines. What are the minerals that we mine in South Africa? Now, this is a very interesting table. We are ranked number 1 in the world for platinum. And of all the platinum in reserve, reserves means the amount of minerals that's still under the ground that has not yet been removed. Of all the platinum in the world that has not been mined yet that we know about, 79% is in South Africa. We are ranked number 1 for manganese, and we have 78% of the world's reserves. We are ranked number 1 for chrome, and we have 76% of the world's reserves. For diamonds, we are the second ranked country in the world, having 24% of the reserves. Gold, we are ranked 5th with 12.7%. Coal, we are ranked 7th with 7.4%. And iron ore, we are ranked 6th in the world, and we have 0.8% of the world's reserves. So you can see that we have, as I mentioned earlier, a large variety of minerals, and this makes us independent of other countries. We don't have to import these minerals, and many of these minerals we then sell to other countries, making money from them, either the minerals directly or products that we produce from these minerals. Once again, favoring and hindering factors. I think you're starting to see the pattern that's evolving here now. The factors that favor mining, we've mentioned it in the previous slide. We have a wide range of minerals. We have large reserves of minerals. So not only do we have a big variety of minerals, we have lots of them as well. We have lots of unskilled labor, and that's important because mining is a physically intensive activity, and you need lots of people to do hard work, and there's lots of unskilled labor in South Africa. We also have lots of skilled labor, most of them from foreign countries, people initially from foreign countries, people who came here from the UK, from Germany, etc., when gold and diamonds were just discovered, who had lots of experience in mining, and those skills were then passed on. Many countries, as we mentioned before, invested money in our mines. We have a well-developed infrastructure. A lot of the minerals, many of the minerals in South Africa are very close to the surface. We are lucky when it comes to that, which means that it is not that expensive to remove them. So the production costs are lower. Then the quality of our minerals also is very high. We've got good quality coal, anthracite, we've got good quality iron ore. So that is a favorable factor. And then we have huge resources of coal. Coal we burn to produce electricity, and we need electricity in mining, in agriculture, in all the different industries, in all the different activities that make up our economy. What are the negative factors? The factors that hinder mining. For miners, underground, the temperatures are very high. It costs a lot to train miners, to take those unskilled laborers and convert them into skilled laborers. There's lots of mine worker strikes. We often see this in the newspaper, on the news and television, that mine workers are once again striking. Most of our mining takes place in Gauteng, in the interior of South Africa, and it is far from the harbors. So transport of your mining products to the harbors is expensive. South Africa often has water shortage problems. Mining by its very nature is a dangerous activity. The prices of minerals fluctuate. Those of you that watch the economic indicators on the news will see every night they will say gold is currently at this price and crude oil is at that price, etc., platinum, blah, blah, blah. And you will see that the prices, one day the price is high, which is good because we can sell it for a lot of money, and the next day the price drops. So your mines then lose out because they're selling their products at a lower rate. So that fluctuation in price can also have a negative effect on mining. The labor unrests, protests, the fact that we use large amounts of water for mining, that water could have been used for agriculture, for example, and the fact that minerals are non-renewable. There are many, many mines. If you go into the Northern Cape, for example, you will find areas that were very, very thriving communities where copper, for example, was mined. And today, all those minerals have been removed from the ground, and your settlements have virtually disappeared off the face of the earth because the mineral has all been removed from the ground and mining cannot take place any longer. It's not like agriculture where your product is renewable. Once you've harvested your wheat, you can plant more wheat. You can't do the same with mining. And then very, very last, the last bullet point there is the high number of accidents which occur in mines. Those are the negative factors. Let's move on to secondary activities. Now here, as we mentioned before, we look at industries. Now, types of industries. Now, we're going to look at various types of industries, but all industries can be divided either into what we call light or heavy industries. There's a photo of a light industry, very, very noticeable, yeah, very easily recognizable. There's a Coca-Cola factory, and to the right of it is a heavy industry. Examples of light industries include jewelry, clothing, food and beverages. And then heavy industries, the production of iron and steel products, power stations that are generating electricity, motor vehicle factories, etc. Location, where are they found? Your light industries usually found inside of the CBD, the Central Business District, in the zone of decay, which is just outside the CBD, you know this already, and in industrial estates. Your heavy industries are found outside of the city, and we know why, right? Because of the environmental impact, which is lower down in this table. So they are usually found on the outskirts of the city and close to the raw materials, which your raw materials are heavy. Let's look at raw materials. The raw materials used in light industries are small and are often partially processed by the time the industry gets them. And your heavy industries use large, bulky raw materials which have not yet been processed. Land requirements. Light industries have no specific needs. A light industry can be located anywhere. Heavy industries, however, need large areas of land. The land must be flat. Okay? And if we look at the next point in the table, our light industries use the existing road network and power supply. They don't need special infrastructures. There's no special infrastructural needs. Whereas heavy industries, on the other hand, major roads, railways, water, and power supply is necessary. Our light industries, very lastly, have very little impact. They don't produce much pollution. They have very little impact on the environment. Whereas our heavy industries produce large amounts of air and noise pollution. It reminds me of a class that I teach at school. Lots of air pollution, lots of noise pollution. Right, so those are the two main types of industries. We then get various subtypes, to put it that way, of industries. And very, very quickly, firstly, industries that are raw material oriented. These are located close to the source of raw materials. Why? Because the raw materials are bulky and they are expensive to transport. It would be cheaper to transport the finished product. And examples would be iron and steel and sugar mills, right? It is expensive to transport sugarcane because sugarcane is heavy and bulky. When we've processed it, it is a much easier, smaller product and a much easier product to transport and therefore much cheaper. Market-oriented industries are industries that are located close to the market. The market is the place, the town or the city where my product is going to be sold. And more often than not, these products are perishable. In other words, they can go off. And we look here at fresh produce, baked food, milk products, etc. So those will be market-oriented industries. A footloose industry is an industry that can be anywhere, near the market or near the raw material. It doesn't matter, right? And these industries are helped by improved technology. They involve things like research and design, software companies, jewelry companies, for example. Any product that is produced where it doesn't make a difference, whether it's close to the raw material, close to the market, the industry will still make the same amount of profit. Ubiquitous industries, located anywhere. They generally provide services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Internet services, telecommunication are amongst those industries that are considered to be ubiquitous industries. Bridge industries. These are located between the raw material and the market. They are often called break-of-bulk industries because they are situated at break-of-bulk points. Now you know a break-of-bulk point is any town, any city where cargo is changed from one form of transport to another. So if we go to Durban Harbour, you'll find two types of bridge industries in Durban Harbour. The one, for example, would be the production of sugar. Sugarcane is brought from the surrounding farms to Durban Harbour. It is processed in the harbour area and your sugar is exported. At the same time, crude oil is brought into Durban Harbour. It is processed inside the harbour area. You've got your oil refineries, and then your various products, your diesel and your petrol and your kerosene, etc., is then taken to the various points where it will be sold or where it's going to be used. So those are bridge industries. Now, what must we know about industries? The factors that affect. We don't just build industries anywhere. When we are going to locate the industry, what are the factors that we take into account? Let's start in the top left corner. Power, the northwestern corner. Power. Is there electricity available? Is there a source of raw materials? Do we have enough people to work in the industries? Is there enough labor? Government or local government policies around that particular industry. Will that particular industry be allowed to be set up in a particular area? Is there a market? Are there people who are going to buy the products? Is there enough water available? Do we have communication networks? What about transport networks? Are there enough roads? Is the land relatively level for the industries to be built on? So those are the factors which affect the location of an industry. Now, this section is going to be tested in your map work paper as well. So let's look at this extract from the map of Ceres. And the question in the exam was discuss, the questions in the red block, discuss the factors that affected the location of industries in Ceres. And let's have a quick look. Raw materials, there we can see there are cultivated lands and there are orchards and vineyards. So the products, the crops that are being grown on the cultivated lands, the fruits that are being grown in the orchards and vineyards will be the raw materials. If we go back to our slide, we see that there is power. There are power lines indicated on the map, showing me there's electricity. There's the town of Ceres, the grey area. That's providing a large market. There are hundreds, thousands of people living there who will buy the products. There's a good transport network. I can see a main road. I can see a railway line. Water from the reservoirs. The air is fairly level. We can see that because the contour lines are spaced very, very far apart. And there's a source of labor. We can see the residential areas around Ceres, which will provide a source of labor. Now, in South Africa, you know that there are 4 main industrial regions. For this coming exam, learners, please take note, your textbook shows 4 regions. Only 2 of those regions are going to be examined. And if you look at the screen, you will see that Durban Pinetown and Durban Pinetown and the Southwestern Cape, you must only know the location. Durban Pinetown and the Southwestern Cape is not going to be tested. You must only be able to identify these 2 regions on a map. The PWV, Pretoria Witwatersrand Vereniging, and the Port Elizabeth Uitenhage area, those are the 2 areas that you need to know in detail and that will be examined. Right. PWV area, also known as Gauteng, you need to know the factors. Why is the PWV area located there? Because of the large market, the roads, etc. I'm not going to go through all, we don't have time. And also the types of industries, chemicals, iron and steel, motor vehicles, etc. So that is what you need to know about the PWV Gauteng area. And in the same with Port Elizabeth, the factors of location, it's near to a harbour, it's got a good transport network, etc. And in the kinds of industries, the motor vehicle industry, fruit industry, sheep, cattle, leather goods, etc. Right? This is just a very, very brief summary. Ensure that you know these 2 industrial areas very, very well, and that you can identify the location of Durban Pinetown and the Southwestern Cape on a map. Strategies for industrial development. So, in South Africa, we don't assume that industrial development is just going to take place. Our government has put certain plans or certain strategies in place to ensure that industries develop. And the 2 main strategies are what we call IDZs and STIs. Let's start with the IDZs. These are industrial development zones. Now you can see once again that there are 8 IDZs. you must know the location of all. In the paper, they can refer you to a particular IDZ, number 8, for example, which is your Uppington IDZ, and they could ask you which IDZ is located here, and you must be able to name it. However, only one of the IDZs will be tested, and that is the Saldanha Bay IDZ. Now, what you need to know about industrial development zones, they will always be close to harbors and airports, because the emphasis here is on export. The products that are produced at your industrial development zones are destined for the export market. So here we are producing products, not necessarily for local consumption, but these are products that are going to be exported so that we can increase the GDP of South Africa, so that the contribution of industry to the GDP can be increased, and therefore they will always be close to a harbourway airport to facilitate the export process. Then, SDIs, or Spatial Development Initiatives, these are corridors along major transport routes. And once again, you need to know the location of all. So the coast-to-coast SDI, the Platinum SDI, Gauteng, Palabora, etc. You need to know the location of all. But you will be tested on the Platinum and the Richards Bay SDI. And Platinum SDI, central section of the coast-to-coast corridor. It's well known for its mineral resources. It offers a number of new mining opportunities. Mineral like golds, diamonds, slate, and nickel are mined in this area. Richards Bay SDI, it's found in KZN. Largest single coal handling facility in the world. Largest producer of aluminium. Leading manufacturer of heavy machinery. Learners, very often in the exam, here in this section, because there's so little available on these sections in the textbook, often the exam questions are in the form of a newspaper article or some sort of statistics from these areas. And very often, more often than not, you can answer the question by analyzing the statistics that you are given. But your teachers will still provide you. There are lots of resources available covering this section of work, even though it is not often well covered in the textbooks. The Saldanha IDZ on the west coast, it is close to Cape Town. Renewable energy, oil, maritime shipbuilding and repair, and steel and minerals production. And very important, this is an important exam question. It is often an essay question. For both the SDIs and the IDZs, you can be asked what is the positive impact either of the SDI or of the IDZ on local communities. And here you need to look at things like the fact that employment is created, that the earning potential of individuals increases. This increases the buying power of people. Notice these are separate points. They speak to the same thing. They all speak to the reduction of poverty, but they are separate points. Do not be afraid to list them all. So both your SDIs and your IDZs will create jobs. They enable people to earn more money. People therefore can buy more products. People get moved out of poverty. The poverty is reduced. They can afford more and better services. Standard of living of people will increase. People will have access to better infrastructure. Their skills will be uplifted because of these SDIs and IDZs. People will be trained. There's lots of development of entrepreneurial skills. Tourism is affected positively. There's a positive impact on tourism. And rural-urban migration will be reduced, right? Fewer people will then move from the rural to urban areas because they can find work closer to where they live. They don't have to move to the large cities to find work. Ensure that you go through the section, and especially that area, the positive impact. That is an essay question that is often asked. Tertiary activities, I'm going to go through this very quickly now. International trade. What is international trade? It is the exchange of goods and services between countries. Trade is the exchange of goods and services. International trade, we just add, between countries. What are imports and exports? We spoke about this earlier. Imports are goods that are brought into a country. Exports are goods that are shipped out of a country, that we sell to other countries. What are the advantages and disadvantages of international trade? We can sell our surplus goods. We use our natural resources optimally. We gain foreign currency. A larger variety of goods become available, better quality of goods. Our countries become more closely tied to others. We exchange technical knowledge, transport and communication networks are developed, salaries of people increase, more people are employed, and competition, healthy competition thrives. The disadvantage is that your developing countries become more dependent on your developed countries, and local production can suffer because often people can import products at a cheaper rate than what it costs them to produce in the country, right? Local industries can be overshadowed. Richer countries can influence political matters, and there might be rivalry amongst nations. Ask your teacher to go through this with you if there's anything here that you do not understand. The role of transport in the economy. Why is transport important to South Africa's economy? Because we have access to different locations, we get new markets, it increases our trade, our less developed areas become more developed, costs are reduced, and business efficiency is improved. And the last section that we're going to look at is the informal sector very quickly. We know that the informal sectors where people that are not employed, these are people that are not registered, don't pay tax, and examples are people that are walking, your parking guards, your casual laborers, etc. Right? Characteristics: people work for themselves, they are semi-skilled, very little money is put into it, mainly occurs in developing countries, they don't really have job security, and most important, they don't contribute to the GDP. The reasons why people get involved in the informal sector: they lose their jobs, farms become mechanized, people aren't qualified, and immigrants can't find legal employment. How is this sector important? It provides income to people who don't have work. It decreases unemployment. Goods are often sold much cheaper along the side of the road. People have developed entrepreneurial skills, and crime is often reduced. Problems: these people are harassed by authorities, they have no access to proper trading facilities, they're exposed to the weather, they don't get bank loans, unreliable income, etc. And lastly, how can the situation be improved? People can be provided specific areas for trading, they can be given infrastructure, access to bank loans, the sector can be regulated, private and informal sectors can form partnerships, and learnership programs can be developed. When we're going to Bellville here, in the Bellville CBD, here are the various reasons why people trade in the Bellville CBD. Proximity to transport, proximity to customers, there's less competition from others, there's the availability of space, there's less crime, and there's the proximity to suppliers. These are the reasons that informal traders gave as to why they trade in downtown Bellville. The items that are traded: 3% herbs, 11% barbers and hairdressing, clothing and shoes, etc. This is a very interesting statistic showing us the various items that are traded in the Bellville area. And then our last slide before we finish, how can we improve Bellville's business environment? By ensuring that there are fewer drug lords, by cleaning up the area, making more storage available for people, for your informal traders. The police can be more visible, better kiosk structures, better ablution facilities, security, capital investment, etc. Okay? So, learners, we've now come to the end of our session for today. Thank you very, very much for paying attention. I know that you have taken in a lot of work today. I haven't even had a chance to check on the WhatsApp messages. I'm sorry for that. But I have, in our 55 minutes now, managed to cover the entire South Africa economy section. This presentation will be made available to your schools. Ask your teachers for it. Go through it and ensure that you know all the work that has been covered in this section. I want to wish you all of the best for the rest of this year. You have a lot of work to cover in a very, very short space of time, but you can do it. Your time management is important. The amount of time and the amount of effort and your will to succeed is going to be the most important factor that will work in your favor. So all of the best to you. God bless. Good luck with your final exams. And thank you for tuning in today. Thank you very much.